What's your name, sir?
It's Ben. I called earlier a few weeks back and I got slammed on every street, I think. So I hope I do better this time.
Oh, I think I remember. Did I label that the uh, worst decision or worst call or something like that in history?
Well, it was a train wreck. I mean
Was
the
that the one with Ace King? Ace King?
yeah, that's it.
Okay, I
Yeah, that's it.
remember this. So you got a hand for us here, Ben?
Yeah, so it's a 2-5, 800 max, nine-handed.
All right.
And
So
we're playing 1500 effective.
2-5, 1500 effective. Is that the cap in the game or it's like a 1K cap game or
Yeah,
something?
it's 800.
800. Oh, okay. So you guys are pretty deep. Cool.
So Undergun opens to 20,
Okay.
plus one calls, and it folds all the way to me in the big blind. And I have King of Heart, King of Spades, and I three bet to 100.
So under the gun to 20 plus one calls, you three bet to 100, which is 4x plus the call. You could actually
Yeah.
go sometimes a little bit larger than this as well. But I mean, I think I'm fine with it. I mean, where I see the mistake is people probably going, too small. So obviously, I
Mhm.
have no problem with that. Everything seems good so far.
Yeah, Undergun four bets to 250.
So under the gun, four bets to 250. I
Yeah,
assume the other
and
guy folds out.
yeah, plus one folds,
Okay.
and I call.
So plus one folds and hero calls. Okay, so a couple things. I don't remember. Are you a CLP website subscriber?
No, I'm not.
You're not. So just a couple things here. I'll start. No, I'll start in order. So do you think that under the gun's four betting range here could possibly be slightly wider because the guy called behind you, or is it tighter because he called behind you?
Well, because he called, I would say it's wider theoretically, but the way the games play,
Uh huh.
um, I don't think like I think it's a pretty tight range. I mean, I'm not gonna be too wide from under the gun. I mean, I'm thinking about my range here. I probably
From the big
have
blind. Oh, you
like
mean
in
if
the
you're the
big
under the
blind,
gun? Right. Okay.
I'm probably like have tens plus, ace queen suited plus. So I mean, he might find some bluffs sometimes,
You
but
know,
I, I think his range is pretty tight.
okay, yeah, I agree with you. So, if you're playing it against an aware player, there are definitely hands that I would four bet here from under the gun because a guy called behind me that I otherwise might just call, especially in a tight configuration. This is a pretty tight configuration. The reason why is because you're in the big blind, so you can call with a lot of your medium strength hands and not worry about getting squeezed behind, right? So the
Hmm.
big blind is actually one of these spots where, sort of newer school no limit thought is you tend to, you three bet linearly, especially at this depth. But it's one of the few spots where you can actually go a little bit polar out of the big blind just because you are calling so much sort of in between. Now, I think that usually live players are very value heavy here. Like, I don't know if you're, finding the three bets with like the ace four suited out of this configuration or like the occasional suited connector. That's number one. So I agree with you there. And then my second question is that did you just think that this was always going to be just a call to a four bet?
Yeah, I didn't think about five betting. Like, I'm not even sure I have a five bet range here, to be honest. Like, I'm looking at this as I'm thinking he has ace king suited,
Yeah.
king with queens maybe, but I think like queens play much more as a call in this game than as a four bet in this spot. So
It's interesting you say that. I mean, I agree. You're going to have more sort of in-depth knowledge about this particular player pool, but Queens is an interesting one because that's where I think where like I would do a ton of four betting. Queens is one that
mm,
really comes out. Queens and maybe Ace King off are the two hands where with a guy calling behind me, I'm going to four bet a lot more than I'm going to call. But if there was no but one behind me, I would call a lot more than four
mhm,
bet. So those are,
I agree.
those things. Now it's interesting too in live play. It's like, what does a five bet range look like, right? I mean, talking to Mark Goon, one of our content creators, says he doesn't really have a five bet range live, and I can kind of buy that, like to the point where it's just I think it also depends on stack depth too. It's just really hard to balance like a five bet bluffing range in a particular spot here too. You can't go wrong by always putting in the extra bet with aces, and you're supposed to sort of balance that out with ace king suited. But I think that I would do a lot of calling here too if I were you. I have no problem with the way that you're playing it so far. So it looks like it's like 520, right, to the flop.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Flop comes nine of hearts, nine of diamond, eight of hearts.
Nine of hearts, nine of diamonds, eight of hearts, and you have king of hearts, king of spades. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I check,
Yep.
and he bets 150.
So really small.
Yeah, kind of less than third. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, this is really interesting here. Off the top of my head, it's really, really small. Kings don't need that much protection. You do see some sort of protection raises, though, as you get shallower and shallower. I think you probably have enough stack depth where this is mostly a call, but you would be surprised that you will sometimes see solvers like raise with hands from out of position, especially for some equity protection slash value in a spot like this to small sizing. And it's interesting because it kind of shifts with the suits in your hands. Like it kind of favors having the heart so that you can call across and continue across a lot of turn cards that are hearts. But then
Mhm.
as you move forward, depending on what happens, sometimes you want the heart in your hand, sometimes you don't want the heart in your hand. I could see sometimes raising though to this type of sizing. I think most of us probably just call in game.
Yeah.
Is that what you did? You called?
I did call. I find that having the king of hearts is worse than not having it because again, I'm thinking his range is much more value than bluffs. So, I mean, if he has a bluff, he has a good one mostly. So that would mean ace of heart with, let's say, king of heart, jack of heart, queen of heart, let's say something like that. So having the king of hearts is worse, I think, than
Because it
not having.
blocks some of his calling hands, you mean, with like the flush draws with a king in it?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, that is one way to look at it. I just know that if you look into it, and again, I don't want to go down, this is not the whole purpose of this. Because I remember doing a lot of work with this, is that a lot of times the solvers actually prefer at this point in the hand having a heart in your hand
Mhm.
so that you can continue on across turns
Oh, yeah.
when deep. All right, so the pot's 820 now. All right, so, and I actually put this in on the
Maybe the
screen.
thought I'm having is it's much more relevant on the turn than on the flop. You're right.
Yeah.
So pot is 820. Turn is a five of clubs.
All right, so the turn here is the five of clubs. That's a pretty big brick.
I check
Uh-huh.
and he bets 450.
All right, so check 450. So now he's going a little bit half pot size. Now I just want to do a little math. If you call, the pot will be 1720, and you guys will have what, about 650 left? Is that it?
Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
about
Yeah.
1720, 650 left? I mean, that's only like one third. God, I think maybe to this sizing, I mean, is this going to be just a check jam? I mean, I can see if you were to have like half a pot size bet left here, I can probably see calling, but I think at this point, unless for some reason you're thinking about folding on a break at the end, the pot's pretty bloated up here. I mean,
hmm
1700 and then you only have 650 left. I mean, you could easily make a case here where this is just a jam here if you're going to go with it. I mean, that'd be an insane fold because then you have to look at it like if he does have queens, if he does have an overpair, if he does have some sort of hand with hearts in it, he's going to be getting like 4-1 on your shove. It's going to be hard for him to fold. It just is kind of a disaster if it goes check, check, and then, he rolls back queens that he would have called with to your check jam. Unless like somehow you're thinking about folding at the end. I mean, was that going to a one-third pot size bet?
I think the inflection point is right here because obviously I can't fold on the river, whatever the river is. I mean, maybe if the river's an ace, I can find a fold, but I don't think I would honestly being getting 3-1 on the river. So I guess I
Well, so
guess
then,
shoving is
well,
is
then
the
the
best course
question,
of
well, the
action.
only way, the only other time then shoving, if you're always going to call across a brick, the only other thing that I can think about that why you wouldn't shove here is if you think there is more value in playing this hand as a bluff catcher, that he's going to three barrel as a bluff. There's more value in doing that than him calling with whatever value he has now to a check jam. You know what I'm saying? Because once he gets up to like 1700 and it looks like you're calling, I just don't know if those hands that you want to bluff are going to bluff because it just looks so much like you're calling. So, I
Hmm.
mean, maybe you want to keep it wide like you've got tens here, and maybe you would continue on with tens plus. Most of the time, I would check jam. The only time that I would call, again, would be a situation where I think a guy might over bluff here, and there's more value in him bluffing at the end. But that takes a special type of live player, you know?
Yeah.
So, what did you do?
I just called,
All right, so hero
and
calls. So we're at 17-20, and you've got about a third pot size bet left, right?
yeah,
Yep.
river's Jack of Diamond.
Okay. I mean, that's, I don't know if it's that relevant. I mean, I don't know if Jacks goes balls to the walls here. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
one more hand that you lose to.
Yeah,
Okay.
but again, I think in this game, Jack's mostly called pre-flop. This type of middle-aged guy who's probably not that used to being 300 big blinds deep. I don't know. Maybe I'm overreading the situation, but uh, I don't think the Jack is all that relevant though.
Mm-hmm.
But
I assume you
so
check.
I check and he rips it in for 650.
So UTG 650. Now I will say again, it's just one of these spots where it's really, really hard to fold. I will say that if we ever thought like somebody might go full, three streets with queens and a four bet pot, I think that this card would really, really lessen that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he's
Yeah.
got queens here, even with one third, I mean, he's just trying to get value from like tens here, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. He loses to queens, and if you're calling with kings, he loses to kings, queens, and he ties with queens, but he loses to kings. He loses to some combos of jacks. So it would be pretty thin. Like even I don't know, even I don't know if I would go. I mean, boy, it's I don't know. At one third, you get into those little situations I'm talking about from your villain's perspective. Like you get into this reverse pot odds situations we like to talk about in Crush Live Poker, where when the pot gets so bloated up, like if I'm your opponent and I know when I jam here for one third, you're going to get 4-1. Does that make my sort of value jam range wider?
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'd have to start thinking about what are you three betting and then calling a four bet with. Even if we had 10, so we beat six combos of tens, we lose to three combos of jacks, and then we lose to six combos of kings if you're always playing kings that way. You see what I'm saying? Like it gets kind
Yeah.
of a little bit gnarly. Now for you, I don't know, man. It's just, I mean, it sucks. If you got here like this, it's just really, really hard. I think it's really, really hard. Some people saying he could have king, king too. Yeah, if I had king, king, I would play it this way if I'm your opponent. So you might
Yeah.
chop some of the time, but it sounds to me like you called. I don't think anyone's going to get on you for that. Did you call?
No, that was my thought. Like I could be chopping with kings. I was praying he could show up with queens, but I think that was hopeful. But he had aces.
So hero
I did.
calls,
I did call that.
hero calls, and UTG has aces. Yeah, I mean that's a little bit of a cooler, but I do think that the turn play is probably the more interesting one, and then also too, if you do find some check raises on the flop, but those things happen. I ran kings into aces at Encore a couple sessions ago, and then I four bet folded the next session against the same nit ace king suited, getting about 1.7-1. I hated that, but it's the nit of the world. But thanks for the call, Ben. I appreciate it.
I would have one question
Sure.
if you have a minute.
Yeah.
Is there a merit to me jamming on the river? Like you suggested, check shoving the turn, but like if I don't and I just jam the river to make sure I get full value against queens, is that a play? You think?
Well, it's just a little bit inconsistent because I would probably only play the hand in this manner if I thought my opponent had a three barrel bluffing frequency. So
Mm,
I would not jam the river as played. Because of that, I would jam turn
yeah,
if I thought we
yeah,
were just
makes
going to get
sense.
it in. You know what I'm saying? You
Yeah,
don't want to prevent your opponent from bluffing, right?
makes sense.
Yeah. So I think the
Cool.
time to get the value from inferior hands is on the turn. Thanks for
Cool.
the call. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye
All
bye.
right.